Okay. Hi, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the session. And today we'll be discussing about deploying .NET API on Azure using Bicep and GitHub Actions. Today, our special guest is Samson Amago, who is a Microsoft MVP, and he will be taking us through the how you can do the deploying on .NET API. And before I give the mic to Samson, I would like to repeat a few things about today's session. Today's session is going to be recorded and will be available in our YouTube channel. You can go ahead and if you miss it, you can watch it there. And secondly, there is certificate of participation. Be sure to be till the end of the session to receive your form and fill out to receive your certificate of participation. So without any more delay, I'm moving the mic to Samson and get started with the session. Over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Good day. Um, so in today's session, we're going to be talking about deploying .NET APIs with Bicep and GitHub Actions on Azure. So, who am I? I am Samson Amuku. I am also a full stack developer and a Microsoft MVP. And that is my blog there, swagloons.com. So let's just get right into it. So what exactly is Bicep? So Bicep is a domain-specific templating language that was created by Microsoft to aid easy deployment of resources on Azure. And Bicep, I would say Bicep is like a best alternative to the already existing templating engine or templating tool on Azure called ARM templates. So why would you want to use Bicep? Bicep is easy to learn. The syntax is quite concise, and is also like it all has like easy interoperability with Azure resources as well. Then Bicep is free. So using Bicep to deploy your resources to Azure does not require like extra fees or cost. It's entirely free. And it's also open source. Bicep supports all Azure resources. So you don't have to worry about, is my resource being supported by Bicep? Bicep supports all Azure default resources or Azure native resources. Then another extra benefit of it in terms of support is that when a new resource is being supported or added to Azure, you don't have to worry about if Bicep would support it or not, because Bicep has like a very fast sync time, and it's also like updates to new packages on time compared to like third-party infrastructure as a code to like Terraform and Pulumi. Then Bicep is intelligent in its orchestration. So what does this mean? When you're defining your resource using the Bicep file, you don't have to worry about the order in which your resources are being written out. Like Bicep is quite intelligent and it creates the accurate dependency tree for you. Then also we are going to be talking about GitHub Actions because we'll be using GitHub Actions in this workshop. So GitHub Action is basically a reusable file that enables software developers to write out their software development like life cycle and also their workflow as well. So why would you want to use GitHub Actions? GitHub Actions is actually easy to learn. The syntax is much, but it's also easy to learn. The documentation is quite intuitive to navigate through. Then it has seamless integration with GitHub. You don't have to worry about if GitHub Action supports multiple GitHub features because it was built by GitHub. So it could easily listen to events and set up triggers for various actions. Then you could also like test out your code or build your tools in various popular environments of your choice, like macOS, Windows, and Linux. Then another great feature about GitHub Action is that not only are you constrained, that you're not constrained to just using actions created by GitHub. You could actually create your own custom actions that suits your own need. So what are we going to be building today? We are going to be deploying a .NET Web API to Azure Web App Service with the aid of Bicep and GitHub Actions. So in this workflow, you can see the Bicep file. So the Bicep file would hold the definition of what our server will look like in terms of the properties and the features of our web application. Then the API contains the code. So once I push the code to GitHub using Git, it will trigger my GitHub Actions to execute. And my GitHub Actions would now deploy the resources and the API to Azure. So let's get building. So this is VS Code. So I'll be making use of the C# dev kit. It's a new extension on VS Code that enables you to easily create a C# template for your project. So I'll be creating an API here. So I'll just click on the create.NET projects. Then I'll type API here. Let's call this project. Let's call it API Africa. Select. Then I'll wait for the project to be built. Okay, I'll set the project name. Web Africa. It will take a while and the project will be created. So awesome. I have my API running here. And so just one other thing, just the fact of supports like .NET supports. Currently, the GitHub Action Runner does not support .NET 8, and I have .NET 8 running on my system. So I'll just have to downgrade this to 7. Yeah. So let's see if this is running locally. If this is running properly here. So I would cd into Web Africa and execute .NET run. Yeah. So once I click on this, the endpoint should be weather forecasts, I suppose. Yeah, so have it running, but let me just adjust it so that it would be the root endpoint. .NET run. Okay. Yeah, so it's working. So next, I would so let me close this server. So the next thing I want to do here is to set up my Git. So I just set up Git in the roots folder. So Git init. So I have Git running. Then I want to exclude some files. So to do that, I would create my git ignore file. .git ignore. So here I would use the asterisk, so like recursively remove all bin folders for bjl. And I also want to remove the properties folder as well. So if you open here, you can see this is not being tracked again by Git. So that is awesome. Next, I would create so when you're working with GitHub Actions, you would have to create your workflow file in the .github/workflows folder. So I'll do that also in the root. I'll say that's GitHub workflows. And before I create the workflows, let's work on setting up the infrastructure in the Bicep file. So let's create a folder in the root here called infrastructure. Then infrastructure, let's create a file called server.bicep. Yeah. So this file would hold the definition of the resources. So when you're working with Azure Web App Service, there are two important things that you need. You need the server farm, and you'd also need the web app, the website's resource provider. So one other trick for someone that is not very sure, if you have issues knowing the actual resource provider to use, I'll advise you to use the Azure portal to create that resource. And after creating the resource on Azure portal, you could go down to the ARM template section of the settings, and there you see the actual resource provider. So I already know that what I need, the two resource providers I will need to set this up would be the server farms resource provider and the sites provider. So let's get that. So resource, I'll set the ID here as my server farm, although you could use anything you want. Then all these are resource providers. But since I've already checked the resource provider that I'll be using, I don't need to search now on the internet. So I'll just select server farms. Next, I would set the name. So what I want this server farm to be. Let me just call it my server farm, or Samsung server farm. Then location, the location, I want it to be the same location with my resource group. So I'll just say resource, this is a function in Bicep. So resource group dot location, and it would create this resource using the location of the resource group. Then the SKU, the stock keeping units. So this is the type of server that I want to use. If you're not really sure about this, you could browse about various, you could go online and browse about different SKUs. So I can just search SKUs for Azure service, Azure Web App Service, Web App Service. So I could even search through blogs and I'll see them. So they have the free, the basic, the standard, all this. And also GitHub Copilot makes it quite easy for me. It just does a lot of auto completion here. Then I'll be using the basic tier. So the basic tier, and the name is B1. That is a short code for it. Then I want this server to be a Linux server. So I'll set it here. Next, I'll set the web application that will be running on this server. So let me just call the ID my server farm app. So let me call it my server farm app. And then I'll make use of the sites provider under the web provider. So I'll set the version. It should be the latest API version. 09-01. Then the name property here. So this name property will be the name that you want to use to access this web application. Do you want the web application to be, if I want the web application to be Samsung server farm app.azure web app azurewebsites.net, then I could set it to something server app. But I don't want it to be something server app. I just want it to be something else. So let me call it something. Let me call it Swagblooms. Swagblooms. That's the name of my website anyway. So I'll call it Swagblooms, and I'll set the location to also I'll set the location of this resource to also be the same with the location of the resource group. So this should work. Then properties. So this property, I want to set the server farm ID. So that is the server in which this web application will be created in. So I'll set it to be this one above. So I'll have to use the ID. So my server farm.id. Although you could set extra properties and configuration, but I'll just leave it as slim as possible. So I think this should work. Next, we'll get into the workflows file. In the workflows file, let's create a YAML file. So the YAML file is used to define how you want your GitHub workflow to operate. So you define various logics and actions to take place. So let me call this one build and deploy .yaml. Now, when creating the YAML file, the YAML file has various important or required keywords, and one of them is the name. So this should be the name of the workflow. So I want to call this workflow deploy ASP.NET core app to Azure web app. Then when you're also creating your workflow, you have to listen to some events that will trigger the workflow. So for this workshop, we'll be making use of the push trigger. So anytime you push to GitHub, and I want to filter it down to the master branch, anytime I push to GitHub on my master branch, this workflow will be executed. Now, there are some things that I would want to use throughout this workflow. So to make it easy for me to use it or reuse this variable, I would create the env object in my YAML file. So the first one would be, the first env will be Azure web app name. So this name should conform, it should be in consonance with the name is set out here. So I use Swagblooms. So I have to set this to Swagblooms. Next, the .NET version. So let me set out the .NET version. I'll be making use of 7.0. Then I'll set the resource group. Although I've not created the resource group, we'll get into that. So let the name of this resource group be Swagblooms web app. And before I continue, I would want to use the terminal to create this resource group on Azure. So to do that, I'll open my terminal. Let me clear it. Then I'll type in some commands. I'll say AZ group create. Then I want to create this resource group in EastUS. And I'll set the resource group to be that's to be the same name with this. So Swagblooms web app. Then after doing that, I would hit my enter key. I'll wait a bit for the resource group to be created. Yeah, so my resource group has been created. Next, before I continue on the workflow, I would also want to create a service principal. So the service principal serves as an application that works on your behalf to carry out some operations on Azure from GitHub. So to create a service principal, I'll execute this command. And I want the service principal to have access over this resource group, Swag Blooms Web App. So let's get into that. So I'll type in azad sp create for OBAC name. I could name the service principal anything. So let me just choose my app. Then I'll give it a role. I'll assign it a role of contributor. So the contributor role. Next, I'll have to define the scope. So this scope's property would be what would restrict it to a particular resource. I want it to have access over just the scope of this Swag Blooms Web App. So all I need to do is to copy this here. I'll copy it and paste. Now I've assigned the scope here. Then the final configuration or thing to set, the final flag to set is SDK ports. So I'll wait a bit and it seems like there's an error somewhere. Oh, I didn't write scopes properly. So yeah. So I'll wait a bit and it should display a JSON with some config inside. Nice. So I'll have to copy this JSON as I'll use it later on to set as a secret variable or secret key in for my GitHub Actions to use. So I'll just copy this. I'll come back to this later. So back to the workflow. So now that I've set the resource group name to be Swag Blooms Web App, the next thing that I'm going to do is to set out, I'll define the jobs. So jobs contains like various actions. A job holds multiple steps. So in this jobs property, I could have like multiple jobs inside. But for this workshop, we'll just be making use of just one job. So I'll call it build and deploy. Then I have to define the environment this job will be executed on in the runner. So let's work with Ubuntu. So I'll select Ubuntu latest. Next, I'll define the steps. So the first step here would be to check into the repository. So let me just write this out. Check out the repo. So this is actually a comment. This bounce symbol is used for writing comments in the YAML file. So I'll be making use of the checkout action. So this would grant my runner access to the repository to just copy the file. Then next, let's set up Azure CLI. And the name, let me name this one. Install Azure CLI. Then to be using the Azure login action. So Azure login V1 action. Then I'll also have to set the credential. So the credential would basically be this JSON that we got from executing the scopes, the service principal command. So I'll set the credential here. Yeah, so this is fine. But I'm yet to actually define this in GitHub. I'll still do that. So after this step, the next thing I'll do is to set up the infrastructure. So I'll name this orchestrate web server. Then it will make use of, I want to execute some commands in PowerShell. So the default shell in GitHub Action is bash, but I want to use PowerShell. So I'll set the run command. Then I'll use the easy deployment command to deploy and set up my infrastructure using the Bicep definitions. So I'll say easy creates resource group env does rg name, then I'll say template file. So a template file will be this file here, this server.bicep file. So I'll just have to select it. So I'll say infrastructure / server.bicep. So after that, the next step would be to set up the .NET Core SDK. Let's say setup.NET Core. Core SDK. Then I'll name this step as setup.NET Core. Then I'll allow Copilot to complete this for me. It's made some errors with indentation. So I'll be making use of .NET 7 as I defined above here. So you can see the .NET version I'm using is .NET 7. So I'm using this version in this step. So after this process, the next thing I'll do is to publish the web application. So I'll say run .NET publish. Then I'll name this step .NET publish. Then I'll run some commands. So .NET publish. I want to publish it in release mode in the publish folder. So after this step, the next thing I'll do is to deploy the Azure web application. Deploy the .NET web application. So I'll say deploy web app to Azure. Then I want to execute some command in PowerShell. So I'll make use of the shell property. Okay, I'm not even finding it. So let me say code is deploy web app to Azure. Then I'll be making use of the PowerShell terminal. Then I'll use the run keyword here. So to deploy, I'll first have to zip the application that was published to this publish folder. So I'll make use of the compressed archive PowerShell command to do that. So compress archive was publish. I want to compress everything inside this recursively. I want to zip it into the publish.zip file. Then after this publish folder has been compressed into the publish.zip file, the next step would be to deploy it to Azure Web App. So I'll use the AZ Web App deployment command to do that. Source config zip. And I'll use the name of the resource group. After that, I'll set the name to be the name of the web app, which is Swag Blooms. Then the next thing remaining is to set the source. So we're going to be using the publish.zip file to publish it. Then after the deployment has completed, I would want to have a summary of the deployment that contains the link to the published or deployed web application. So I would say the web app URL is https/ yeah. Then to output it, I'll have to pipe in this string into a particular environment variable. So I'll pipe it into the GitHub step summary. So I'll pipe into the GitHub step summary. Yeah, so that is that. So now you'll probably be asking, how will I do this? How will I set the secret, the GitHub secret to, I think I've lost it. Yeah, how will I set the GitHub secret to this option, this thing here? So let's see, I think I copied it then. So I've not lost it. So the first step I'll do, I don't want to go to GitHub Actions. I don't want to go to GitHub website to do that. I'll do everything here on GitHub on my VS Code. And to make that possible, I had to download the GitHub Actions extension. So the GitHub Actions extension helps with the linting and IntelliSense on VS Code. So the first step I'll do will be to execute my git command. So git add everything, git commits, say init. Yeah. So the next thing I'll do will be to publish it. So I'll publish this as API Africa in a public repository. So let me open it on GitHub. So this is the repository. Now the next step would be to, oh no. So the next step would be to set the secrets for this action. And to do that, I'll click on the GitHub Actions. But for some reason, I think there's a little issue with this extension. I would have to restart my VS Code for it to bring out the configurations here for me. So let me close my VS Code and open it again. All right. So if I go back to my GitHub Actions, I would see that to refresh automatically, and there will be some drop downs. Some drop downs will be displayed for me to set the secret and environmental variables. So let me just wait a bit. It should display soon. Yeah. So in this secret drop down, you can see the repository secret option. So if I click on this plus sign, this button here, a dialog box would be prompted for me to input the name of the secret. And the name of the secret would have to be this one, Azure credentials. So I'll type in Azure credentials. You could use a different name, but it just has to conform to any name you're using in the workflow. Then I'll now set my Azure credentials value to be this object that I copied initially. So I'll set it, and yeah, it's been set. So the next step would be to deploy. And all I need to do is to go to this current branch dropdown. And if I hover a bit on this workflow that was triggered, I'll see this icon. If I click on it, it will redirect me to the workflow progress or status. So the initial one failed because, okay, let's see. Let's see why it failed. The installation process of Azure CLI, and that was because there was no credential to work with. So now that we were able to like credential using this option, and if we try to rerun the job, it should work. So let me rerun this job. Rerun failed jobs. Rerun. So to expand on what's really going on, I can click on this. So it seems like I have to refresh. Okay, so I'll click on this. So they are saying this is not available. Let me see why. That's weird. GitHub Actions. Okay, there seems to be an issue with the secret generator. So let me go to my settings. Then I'll go to secrets and variables under security, click on actions, and under credentials, I should be able to set this. But let's go back to what's the command I executed here to be sure I wasn't making a mistake. Let me see. Swag blooms web app US. Okay, let me just rerun the command again. I hope I didn't make a mistake here. Easy SP creates new contributor scopes subscription AD5 blah blah blah. So let me rerun this again. So I'll copy this. And let me try and update it from here. So next I'll refresh this settings property. Then go back to my web application, go back to the repository and try to redeploy. So I'll just rerun this job. Let's see. So let's just wait a bit for this workflow to execute. What am I missing? So it's not for it. It's small benefit. It's greater in the container. Let's see. So let me log in again just to be sure. For some reason, my terminal is stuck. So just wait a bit. Or okay, let me just execute the same command in a different. Easy, okay. So for some reason, I don't know, but okay. Easy lookout. Easy looking. So for some reason, I'm expressing some authentication issues, but just be patient with me a bit. So it's like on the subscriptions. Easy login. Okay, so let me try again. It's weird. So I'm trying to create a new service principal. Hopefully it works. easy. Wait, let me refresh my. Let me look out from there. Is look out. Okay, let me refresh my VS Code. Seems like this VS Code is experiencing some authentication issues. So I'll close my VS Code and open it again. Okay, let me try that once more. So for some reason, I don't know, I'm expressing some authentication issues. So I'll just show you a sample of what the process ought to have been. Okay. So this is a sample application that I deployed like an hour ago, and I didn't experience any authentication issue. But after the workflow, this should be the kind of summary that you would see. So after the workflow, once you scroll down, you'd see this output. The web app URL is this. I actually deleted this resource, so currently this service doesn't exist. So if you go to the VS Code application and you click on the workflow, and click on this workflow right here, this is the string that's been outputted into the summary environmental variable. So that is what makes this output possible, this one. So that is it. That is all for today's section. And if you have any question, please feel free to ask. Where's the last slide? So thank you. So these are the links to my socials, my website, my LinkedIn, and my Twitter. So if you have any question, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Samson, for the session. And if you guys are having any question, um, please do drop it in the chat box. And if you like the today's session, we will be having more session in our community. And the upcoming next session is on Azure fundamentals. So it's a 1 day session on the fundamentals, and it gives you, a overview on what you can should be studying for the Azure 900, and we'll be going through the important things in it. So yeah, you can participate in it if it's a uh, something that you want to be doing. And here is a link to getting your certificate of participation. And once you get it, please do share it on LinkedIn and tag us. We'll be happy to see you guys have successfully received your certificate of participation. And also, please do follow Samson on his social so that he gets the support on doing the collaboration or doing the contribution for the community. So please do go there and check it out. Yeah, he just shared it in the chat box. Okay, we see no more questions. I have correct. I had just shared the link to the certificate of participation. You can check it. It's actually above your a few messages above your text. Uh, we don't have mentoring sessions. It is a training which is we do, but that is something not really mentoring, but it's a webinar thing which we dedicatedly doing for the training purpose. So mentoring is something that we are not currently having. Okay, if that's the case, if you are somebody new, please do join the community, and I have just shared it in the chat box. And also, this if you are using your laptop, you can scan the code to join there. It's the center right there on the meeting presentation, and I just shared then the link to our community as well. We'll be having more trainings and more sessions in the community, so please do join the community to get updated. So that is it for the today's session. We see no more questions that is related to what Samson was explaining, and in that case, we can wind up this meeting and go on with the rest of the day. And I hope you guys had already received a certificate. Hope you guys will be sharing, and thank you for Samson to be sharing his knowledge with us and taking the time to share and take the time to show the demo. And thank you all for joining with us today. And hope you guys will be having a great day, and be sure to be in the community. Thank you. With that, I am ending the recording, and yeah, I'll be here for next 5 minutes just in case some